We live in a world where language has become both weapon and refuge, and nowhere is this more evident than in Donald Trump's latest volley of remarks in which he accused Zelensky, the leader of a country under brutal invasion, of allowing a war with Russia to happen. It's outrageous, as if the sovereign nation of Ukraine had simply left the front door ajar and invited the tanks in. This is, in both diplomatic and moral terms, abhorrent. And if you consider the extent of the statement, Trump wrote on Truth Social that Zelensky and crooked Joe Biden did an absolutely horrible job in allowing this travesty to begin. He then described Russia's missile strike on Sumy, which killed 34 civilians, including children, as a mistake. A mistake! Not a war crime, not an atrocity, but a tragedy. Not a tragedy. Trump didn't describe it as a tragedy. Anybody else would. Merely as an administrative slip, as if Putin had misdirected a FedEx parcel or misadjusted his underwear. The implications are chilling. To blame Zelensky, a wartime president leading a country defending its right to exist, is to ignore the bedrock of international law. Ukraine didn't start a war with a country 20 times its size. Russia invaded Ukraine, a violation of the UN Charter, countless bilateral agreements. To invert this reality is not only intellectually bankrupt, but historically illiterate. And Trump's remarks are the diplomatic equivalent of blaming a mugging victim for standing under a streetlight, blaming a woman for wearing a skirt that's too short. When Trump calls the Sumy massacre a mistake, he extends an almost childlike grace to Vladimir Putin, a man whose regime has bombed hospitals, deported children, shelled civilian convoys. A mistake implies accident. But Sumy was no error, was no accident. According to Russia's own defense ministry, the Iskander missiles targeted what they claimed was a meeting of Ukrainian commanders. If true, they chose to strike in the center of a densely populated city, at best a grotesque display of indifference to civilian life, at worst a deliberate terror tactic. It's just meaningless to try to excuse this, and Russian media is filled with claims that Ukraine is using civilian not hostages but shields. Nonsense. This was a celebration of the liturgy on a Sunday morning. European leaders, including Macron and Merz, have rightly labelled this as a war crime, and the EU's foreign ministers have called it a humiliation of diplomatic efforts, and Trump alone has offered euphemism and excuse. Trump insists he's working diligently to stop the death and destruction, yet his envoy Steve Witkoff has met Putin 3 times, while Zelensky has not received even a symbolic visit. The Ukrainian president notably invited Trump to visit. No theatre, no propaganda, just go where you want, he said, urging him to witness the devastation firsthand. And Trump's declined. One suspects he prefers the conflict abstract, reduced to chessboard calculations in which Ukraine is a pawn and Putin a misunderstood genius. Or maybe Trump is just a coward who doesn't want to go anywhere near real danger. Behind Trump's bluster is not real politic, but toy theatre. His theatrical neutrality cloaks a preference, or at least an indulgence, towards the aggressor, and a cowardice. As Zelensky put it, Russian narratives prevail in the United States. Trump said, everybody's to blame. This is a sentence one might expect from a teenage sibling after crashing the family car. It's not the utterance of a statesman. Equating the invaded with the invader, the defenders of Mariupol with the perpetrators of Bucha, is not balance, it's abdication. I think it needs to be said plainly, Putin started the war. Biden, for all his failings, did not. Zelensky, for all his flaws, did not. The war was not allowed to happen. It was unleashed by Moscow. And Trump's remarks embolden aggressors and weaken deterrence by suggesting that Ukraine should have simply capitulated and not resisted. Trump encourages the logic of conquest. If the invaded are to blame for not surrendering fast enough, if they surrendered, the war would be over. Why don't you just surrender? Why don't you just give up? Then international norms dissolve into nihilism. And by the way, that has been said. Why don't you just give up? Why do you keep giving weapons to the Ukrainians because they asked for them? If you didn't give them weapons, the war would be over. That's an argument. We've heard it again and again. We give weapons to Ukraine because Ukraine wants to defend itself and because it's right. If Ukraine didn't want to defend itself, we wouldn't give them weapons, would we? Defend itself from what? From being invaded. And Trump's fixation on ending the war fast without regard to justice or sovereignty mirrors the logic of a contractor looking to finish a project, not a leader upholding peace. And we shouldn't forget, this is the same Donald Trump who once withheld military aid from Ukraine in exchange for political favours. The same Trump who now promises to end the war in 24 hours, yet cannot decide whether Sumy was a tragedy or a miscommunication. Trump's rhetoric is not merely offensive, it's dangerous. It distorts the moral compass of Western leadership. It undermines allies. It gives oxygen to Russian propaganda. Ukraine didn't start a war. It's defending its own independence. In trenches, in hospitals, in the rubble of places like Sumy. To tell them to come back when you're ready for peace, as Trump reportedly told Zelensky, is a scolding of a drowning man who's asked for a life raft. There is a difference between diplomacy and delusion. And history will remember those who knew the difference, and it will remember those who did not.